Will the New York Mets promote any more top prospects this season? We'll discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. You'll also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Swing for the fences on sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now, this is, of course, our Friday Farm Report, where we dive into the Mets minor league system. And last week, I broke down the top 5 prospects on my new top 10 list in this Mets system. I thought about doing numbers 6 through 10 today. Actually, I stretched it to 6 to 11 because there was one guy I just could not keep off this list to discuss. But I want to spend a full show on that. And there were so many notes from the minor leagues today to Doc and Darryl getting their jersey retired next year that I figured we'll bump that to a Saturday show where I can really go in depth on those prospects. And today we talk about the prospect that's in my top 10. I had Ronnie Mauricio at number 5, who still has not been promoted. I've been trying to speak this into existence all week, and maybe this is just my last shot at it, because I would love if I posted a Ronnie Mauricio should be called up. Why are the Mets not calling him up podcast, only for us to get the update at some point on Friday that, yeah, they actually are doing it. But I really thought Thursday could be the day where you have a day off for the Mets. You could get Mauricio in town from Syracuse, give him some time to get a little bit more acclimated and hit the ground running on a Friday night game where you're going to have a lot of fans in the ballpark. I really thought that could be the answer. The Mets, up to this point, have not decided to promote Ronnie Mauricio. And what'd he do tonight in Syracuse? Just put up another argument for why he should be up already. He went 3 for 5, stole his 22nd base of the season, hit his 21st home run. On the season now, Ronnie Mauricio is hitting 291, 343 on base, 498 slug. He's got an 841 OPS. Across the board, those are career highs. A career high in average, career high in on base, career high in slug. I mean, look, if you told me before the season that Ronnie Mauricio was going to get on base at a 343 clip, I would have said, all right, he's developed into what you want him to be. And look, I know that league is ripe with hitting. Okay. That is a complete hitters league at this point, the International League. And he's not ranked among the top hitters in the stats like WRC plus or OPS plus that are measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. He's been closer to league average because he strikes out more than he should. Well, not even necessarily strikes out more than he should, but he doesn't walk nearly enough. And that in some ways limits his on-base prowess. And a league where a lot of guys are getting on base a ton and guys are finding their ability to slug, his numbers don't stand out as much against the competition. With that said, he's also leading the league in hits. And overall hits with 136, he has the most hits in the International League. And in the Mets organization this year, if you look at the big leagues, AA, single A, everything else, no one has gotten more hits than Ronnie Mauricio. He also, when it comes to extra base hits, is right behind Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor, who have 54 extra base hits each. Mauricio has 52. He's played 111 games in AAA this year. He has over 500 plate appearances. He has proven everything you can ask from him at that level. He has. And at this point, I just don't see why you're wasting an opportunity to see what he looks like against big league pitching when you're running out some combination of Jonathan Narvaez and Danny Mendick every day. I don't get it. It does not compute in my brain. And I understand that At times they've been disappointed with the defense this year, or they've been disappointed with maybe a lack of motivation when he hadn't gotten the call. At this stage, when you have nothing else to play for, it just continues to baffle me that they don't make this decision and call the guy up. Like I've mentioned many a time, having Brett Beatty in AAA at this point in the season makes some sense for your franchise because he did not perform and he had a long leash to perform at the big league level. And by keeping him in AAA, you get an extra year of team control on a player that you still value highly. That makes sense. Whether it's a cruel business decision or not, it makes sense. They've now passed the deadline where he would lose rookie eligibility. Ronny Mauricio will be a rookie next season if you call him up now. Are you so hyper-focused on maintaining control of these players that you're worried about the whatever 40 days he might accrue if you promoted him tomorrow? It just does not make sense to me. And then beyond that, the title of today's show is, are we going to see any top prospects promoted this year by the Mets? And obviously Alvarez is still with the big league club. Mark Vientos, when he gets off the IL, every chance he'll be back with the big league club and get a chance to finish out the season as maybe the primary DH or get some time at third base. And I guess if you had Vientos starting at third base in the big leagues right now, I could at least stomach the fact that you were looking at a piece for your future. But at this stage with Vientos out, and honestly, like even if you get Vientos back, and it seems like the Mets will, and he'll be in the MLB lineup, you can just DH Vientos and play Mauricio at third base, or if you want to play him at second base, you want to play him in the outfield even. I mean, I don't think the Mets are necessarily entertaining that experiment much longer. But at this stage, to me, it's just get these guys at bats. As much as Daniel Vogelback has turned it around lately, he's not going to be on your team next year. At least I would hope. So it makes sense for me that they would make a move. And then on the other side of it, could you see a pitcher? And I think the guy that everyone's looking at is Mike Vassell, who has had a good last couple of starts in AAA. You look at the Mets rotation. I was trying to find a day that Vassell could start. So their next 5 games, first 3 against the Angels this weekend, Kodai Senga, Carlos Carrasco, David Peterson. Then Tyler McGill and Jose Quintana will be lined up to pitch the first 2 games against the Texas Rangers next week. And then you have a game on Wednesday. Now, technically, Kodai Senga could start that game on 4 days rest. So that's full rest for an MLB pitcher. But last couple times, the Mets have been giving Senga extra rest. And after you just saw Shohei Ohtani get hurt, not that these guys are in the same position at all. It's not that Senga's showing any arm fatigue like Ohtani was before this news that he has a tear in his UCL, but it just makes you more hypersensitive to the fact that you want to protect these guys. And so if Kodai Senga is best served to start on 5, 6, even 7 days rest down the stretch of the season, you only get maybe 5 starts out of him or 6 instead of 7 or 8. It's worth it at this point. It really is. So I think that's where my mind would be at if I'm the Mets, is keeping him on extra rest, in which case you need a starter on Wednesday. Now, Joey Lucchesi did not look great tonight. He pitched in AAA, gave up 10 hits, 6 earned runs, but you could call Lucchesi again. Now, there's a rule, of course, that you can't call him back up because you just optioned him down. But if he's replacing an injured player and just pick any, up and down taxi squad reliever you want to put on the IL, you can manipulate that and get him back up. So Lucchesi would be an option. Other than that, you still have Jose Budo, who could be an option. He started the other day, so if they held him as some starts, maybe they could have him lined up. And really, throughout the rest of the year, I think it's a question about who gets those spot starts, and could Vassell make it onto the 40-man roster, which is a hurdle they have to overcome. They'd have to option somebody off of it, but I don't think that's a big deal when you have guys like, Abraham Almonte on the 40 right now. There's players that you could option off pretty easily. So we'll see. I mean, the first full week of September, okay, so that's the week that starts September 4th. They have 2 off days. They have an off day on the 4th and one on the 7th, Monday and Thursday. After that, they play 16 consecutive days. So you look at that stretch with the 16 consecutive days and trying to get Senga more rest, there should be opportunities for some spot starts. And I'd love to see Mike Vassell pitch at some point this season. Or, of course, before that, I've been campaigning for Christian Scott to make the jump straight from Double A. At this point, I don't know if I see them doing that. They're being very conservative with their approach with these prospects. So maybe your best bet or your best hope is that you see Vassell first start. But I'm getting to the point where I don't even know. I could see the Mets just running out the rest of this year with their 5-man rotation of Senga, Quintana, Carrasco, Peterson, McGill, and getting those spot starts wherever they can from Joe Lucchesi and Jose Budo. And then on the other front with Ryan Mauricio, I cannot imagine that they hold him out all year. But it gets to a point where I can't have confidence that we're going to see him either. So it's just been a strange set of circumstances with how the Mets have been managing their top prospects in a season where you would have thought this would be the time to see what some of them have. But there's also some prospects who had big nights on Thursday night, and that's what we're going to discuss next. I want to take our trip around the minor league affiliates and particularly introduce you a little bit more to Jeremiah Jackson, the prospect the Mets got back in the Dominic Leone trade at the deadline. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Would you want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Sleeper is now offering up to a 100-time payout for up to 8-pick contests where you choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Plus, with built-in group chat functionality, you can see and copy your group's picks with the tap of a button. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy, and there are safe and fast withdrawals. Use promo code LOCKEDON and get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. The New York Mets play the Los Angeles Angels 7:10 Eastern Time tonight. Catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. Got the Binghamton Rumble Ponies hat on. Maybe I should have started with it on today, considering we were talking minor league baseball in the first segment as well. We're going to take our trip around the affiliates. There wasn't much to note from that game in Syracuse other than Joey Lucchesi getting knocked around and Ronnie Mauricio having a big game. So that pretty much covers them. We'll head the other way now back to High A with the Brooklyn Cyclones, who won a 13-12 game on Thursday night. And yet again, Jet Williams had a multi-hit game. It's his 4th multi-hit game in a row, 6 in his last 9 games played. He went 2 for 6 and scored 3 runs. He's now hitting 342, been on an absolute tear, and he scored 2 of those 3 runs on home runs by other top prospects in the Mets farm system. Kevin Parada, who I'll be discussing at more length tomorrow as he makes my top 10 prospects in the back half. And then Ryan Clifford, who I talked about last week as the number 4 prospect in the Mets system, he homered as well. So good day for the Brooklyn Cyclones. The Binghamton Rumble Ponies, they won 7-6. Luis Angel Acuna hit safely again. That's 6 of his last 7 games played. 4 of them have been multi-hit games, as was tonight, 2 for 5 with a run scored. Drew Gilbert went 1 for 4 with an RBI, and then Jeremiah Jackson homered for his 3rd straight game. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of prospects the Mets got at the trade deadline. The best steal, I think, is Jeremiah Jackson. You paid a heavy premium for Luis Angel Acuna and Drew Gilbert. Jeremiah Jackson, you got for Dominic Leone, who you picked up off of waivers this year. You picked him off from out of thin air, basically. You just nab yourself a prospect that I think is probably top 20 in this system. You know, I got to maybe flesh out the back half of my top 20. I've gotten 1 through 11 now. So I'll have to look and see where Jackson ultimately would slide in. But this is a good prospect that the Mets picked up. He was a 2nd-round pick out of high school back in 2018 by Billy Epler. So there's that connection there, of course, with the Angels. He did very well in rookie ball and low A. He had 23 home runs in 1 season in rookie ball, which is pretty impressive. Struggled in the Arizona Fall League prior to the 2022 season, and then struggled in 2022. That was making a jump, though, from low A to double A. This year, Jeremiah Jackson's hitting 242, 319 on base, 447 slug. Yeah, has 20 home runs, over 70 RBIs, 15 doubles, and a 766 OPS. Numbers that don't necessarily jump out, to the greatest extent because, at double A, if this guy's going to be a starter in the big leagues, you want to see some better stats. But even in his second tour of duty in double A, because he did play double A last year, the fact that he's hit 20 home runs with 15 doubles and has driven in that many, that does impress me. And looking at his pedigree as a prospect, okay, he was ranked as high as number 4 in the Angel system. Is that a good system? Not necessarily. These are rankings by Baseball America. But still, to get as high as 4, it's impressive. And then heading into 2022, he was ranked number 5. That was not that long ago. Now, Baseball America had him 18th going into this season. But I think MLB.com from Pipeline had him at 8 at the deadline. So, maybe a top 10 prospect in a really bad system with the Angels doesn't become a top 10 prospect here. But I had some high hopes with Jeremiah Jackson that he could actually be a piece for the Mets one of these days. Not necessarily your starting shortstop. Okay, that's Lindor. Probably not your starting second baseman. That I would imagine is going to be Luis and Helen Cunha. Probably not your starting third baseman. That could be Brett Beatty or Ronnie Mauricio. But a guy that could play all those positions, could play a little bit of outfield too. He has gotten playing time in the minor leagues at shortstop, second base, third base, left field, and center field. Now, primarily in the infield at shortstop, third base, and second, but he still has over 10 games registered at left field and center field. He's got 1 game in right. He's a guy that has that positional flexibility, which is going to make him a really nice utility player at some point. If you get a utility player that finds his way on the roster for 4 or 5 years, for a guy that you just had pitching for your team for 2 months, maybe, that is a steal of a trade. And I think what excites me most is looking at the grades that Baseball America had on Jeremiah Jackson heading into this year. Okay, now the prospect scale, the 20/80 scale, 80 is elite, right? If you get anything over 50, it's an above average tool. And his fielding was graded at a 50, his arm at a 55, his speed at a 55. Those are all really good marks. That's saying he's an above average fielder. That's saying he has a strong arm. That's saying he's got above average speed. And power, he's got 60 grade power. So there is a lot of tools that he's trying to tap into. He's only 23 years old. Now his hit tool was graded at a 30, below average. And that's the problem because that's the tool that you need more than any other, right? The ability to hit for an average. He hit 242 this year. But again, if you're thinking about a bench player, a guy that can tap into some pop and play a bunch of positions, that could be very valuable to the New York Mets. So I really think that was, maybe their biggest steal again of that deadline. You're looking at a system that now has, from this deadline, let's just run it down. Your number 1 and number 2 prospects in Acuna and Gilbert. You have Jackson, who probably filters into your top 20 still, and some proximity to the big leagues, right? He's had 2 trips through Double A. Next year, he's probably in Triple A, and we'll see, right? You got Justin Jarvis, who's pitching in Triple A for you right now. If you go back to earlier in the year, they got Coleman Crow, who did undergo Tommy John surgery for Eduardo Escobar, but still a pitching prospect that you like, that will rehab with you, and we'll see what he ends up having in the future. He's putting up good numbers before he went down this year. And then on top of that, you had the David Robertson trade where you got Marco Vargas and was it Robert Hernandez? Don't quote me on the second name there. That's the catching prospect. But Marco Vargas is the top 10 prospect, or at least a fringe top 10 prospect in this system right now. He's right now considered a shortstop, could be a second baseman long term, but a guy that's performing very well in the complex league. So the more you unpack the Mets trade deadline, the more you understand the talent they brought in and how they really have taken that farm system and added a ton of depth as well as a ton of upside. And I think that Jeremiah Jackson, is a player that has a little bit of both. That has a floor that could help the Mets, and potentially 2025. And who knows, if he has a big season next year, he might impress even more and show that there's more in the tank to either be considered as a trade chip or someone that will factor as a potential super utility guy who actually gets more starts than you think in the future. So excited again about all those moves made. But the news that we'll close the show with: the Mets are going to retire the jerseys of two of the most iconic players in franchise history. How do we feel about Doc and Darryl? I'll discuss it next. First, though, another word from our sponsors. The New York Mets play the Los Angeles Angels at 7:10 Eastern Time tonight. Catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. Doc and Darryl are going to get their jerseys retired together. The Mets announced that today, so that is exciting news for Mets fans, particularly those who grew up on 80s baseball. And I sent out a tweet today when the news came out, and I'll bring it up now for those of you who didn't see it, because I was conflicted. I will be completely honest. I was conflicted when I saw the report. And here's what I said. Am I the only one who doesn't know how to feel about this? Those guys were champs, and their stats are among the top in franchise history. They're also a cautionary tale of what could have been, and that's not necessarily something that had to be immortalized. Now, I know there's Mets fans who love Doc and Darryl that hate me for having that opinion. And the more that I think about it, and the outpouring of support from the fan base has led me to believe that I was wrong to have that take. But I'm still going to defend my thought process, where my initial gut reaction was, don't know about that. When I found out that Keith Hernandez was getting a jersey retired, I thought, great job by the Mets. Applause all around. Well overdue, because he was the piece that took a team that had a lot of bright young talent like Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, and he put them over the top, and he taught them how to win. And he was, without a doubt, the biggest catalyst and the clear captain of that team that put them in the position to be, one of, if not the best team in MLB history in 1986. And I get honoring as many people from that team as you can. And Doc and Darryl had more talent than anyone. But if Keith Hernandez doesn't show up, do those guys win a World Series? I don't think so. Now, you can make the counter argument. Those guys aren't in the system. Does Keith Hernandez win with the Mets? It's chicken and the egg type of situation here. To me, the reason why I was surprised by it is because I didn't expect it. I didn't think that Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden were going to have their jerseys retired. And now this could completely be bias from someone that did not watch them play firsthand. Now, my dad had the VHS tape, the 1986 Mets, the championship video, and I watched that religiously as a kid. So in some respects, from watching that, from reading books about the 86 Mets, I do feel like I've been able to grow up on the team in a weird way. And then, of course, anyone who's watching SNY sees Keith and Ron in the booth every game, and that always connects the franchise back to 86. To me, I think the question just was, what could have been for those guys? I think that's always going to be close to the top of everyone's mind when those guys get brought up. The what could have been. And probably good on the Mets to say, you know what, doesn't matter what they were, was spectacular. And let's remember our history. And those two guys are, arguably the best hitter and the best pitcher this franchise ever developed. Obviously, I think David Wright ended up with the better career. But Darryl Strawberry still got him in home runs, still has that record. Pete Alonso is going to grab that thing if he sticks around very soon. How close is Pete? Darryl's at 252 for his career was what he finished with. Pete's at 185. So let's just say he hits 10 more this year, which is asking a lot. I'm just trying to see if mathematically he could do it before he hits free agency if he left the Mets. Probably not going to happen. He would need 10 more this year and like 60 next year. But if Pete Alonso sticks around, he'll grab that record from Darryl. That's his one real standing record. But also you look at OPS plus. That's measuring hitters on a league average of 100. Darryl Strawberry, the best hitter in franchise history with a 145 career OPS plus. So, there's still some stats that you look back on and say no one was a better hitter um, than Darryl at a time in Mets history. And he's second in career WAR. Third is Carlos Beltran. I'd probably make the argument if Carlos Beltran goes into the Hall of Fame with the Mets hat that he deserves to have his jersey retired. And that's my own bias because I watched Carlos Beltran play. And if I was to say that Beltran should have his jersey retired, why shouldn't Strawberry? And so the more that I was able to think about it and talk myself through it, the more that I came around on it. And I think that this is a good thing the franchise is doing. And it's going to be an awesome day for fans to celebrate those guys. And, what it means to them is worth it in of itself. I mean, to see Dwight's post on Twitter about it, this is a really special thing for these guys who, could have been Hall of Famers, but guess what? They at least left an imprint with the New York Mets, and their jerseys, because of that, are going to be, enshrined forever. With that said, do I still believe that some people are going to look up and see that 16 and that 18 and think about what could have been forever now? Absolutely, but I guess that was always their legacy. Quickly on Doc, though, I mean, the seasons that he had for the Mets were sensational. The career numbers, he's still second best in career WAR. Jacob deGrom, 41.2 wins above replacement. Dwight Gooden, 41.6. So crazy that deGrom was, 3-4 starts away, knowing the way he pitched, from being second to Seaver. And I mean, Dwight's second in wins. He's number one in win percentage, a 649 win percentage. That's really impressive. ERA seventh all time. deGrom's got a lot of the stats that just measure, whip, of course, strikeout percentage, ERA. That's all deGrom. And I think deGrom would deserve his jersey to be retired. And when you compare the stats and the fact that Doc got a World Series, you can make the argument that Doc had a better Mets career. So again, I think we all operate in the bias to the era we saw. And maybe that was my youth a little bit when my gut reaction was that. But I just want to be honest with the way that it hit me when I saw the news today. And, I think that overall, the Mets have made a decision to remember their history through these jersey retirements. And you just wonder, who's going to be next. But Dwight still has the lowest home run per nine in Mets history, 0.51 for his Mets career. No one is going to be able to take away what he did in those first 3 years of his career, particularly 1985, where, he won the Cy Young and he pitched to a 1.53 ERA and he had 16 complete games and he pitched 276 and 2/3 innings and he won 24 games and he struck out 268 and an ERA plus of 225. All those stats I said, there led the league. He was incredible. And these are two, again, probably the best hitting talent, the best pitching talent the Mets ever developed. And with that, they will be immortalized forever. Who's next? I don't know. I don't know. Do they go right to David Wright? Is there someone in the middle? It seems like they're trying to go chronologically here. Do they go back and remember Gary Carter too or Ron Darling? I don't think so. But I guess maybe the other part of it to me with this decision is now I just don't know where the bar is necessarily. Between them and Koosman, and I'm not going to take anything away from Jerry Koosman, a guy I literally never saw pitch or even saw a highlight of. But to me, there's sort of two rings right now of Mets jerseys that are retired when it comes to the players. There's the guys we've been discussing just now, and there's Mike Piazza, Tom Seaver, and Keith Hernandez, in my eyes. But hey, everyone's got their own opinion on it. For all you everydayers, again, I got a special show for you on Saturday to break down the rest of my top 10, kind of 11 prospects. So that's going to be a fun show. It'll be 2 prospects that I'll be diving into in each segment. So make sure you guys check that one out. Going to be a good series this weekend. Mets versus Angels. Didn't do much previewing, but it seems like Shohei Ohtani's going to be hitting. And Kodai Senga is going to be pitching on Friday night. So at least that game is one you should all tune in for. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast on Friday night, you can do so with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets.